I woke after heart surgery with tubes in my arms and a burning ache beneath my ribs. Before I could even ask whether the operation had succeeded, my neighbor Susan called, her voice trembling. "Anna, there's a sold sign in your yard. Men are measuring the house." Then my son Michael entered my hospital room carrying a bag containing only 3 changes of clothes. "You don't need that house anymore, Mom," he said calmly. "I sold it while you were under." He thought surgery had left me powerless. What he didn't know was that my late husband had hidden a safe behind the basement wall, and inside it was something that could destroy Michael's entire plan. Before I continue, please like and subscribe if you believe a mother's trust should never be used against her. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my position, and where you're watching from, and what time it is there. I'd truly love to know who is sharing this story with me. Long before there was a sold sign in my front yard, that house had been the safest place I knew. Robert and I bought it 36 years earlier when we had more courage than money. It sat on a quiet street outside Pittsburgh with faded blue siding, a leaking porch roof, and a backyard so overgrown that the weeds reached my waist. The real estate agent called it a property with potential. Robert looked at the crooked shutters, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "It just needs someone to believe in it." We paid $62,000 for it. Even that felt impossible at the time. I worked night shifts as a hospice nurse while Robert spent his days building cabinets for a small construction company. We rarely saw each other for more than an hour at a time during those first years. I would come home as he was leaving, and he would kiss my forehead with sawdust still clinging to his shirt. Every extra dollar went into the house. Robert repaired the porch after work. I stripped wallpaper in the dining room while Michael, still a toddler, slept in a laundry basket beside me. We sanded the floors ourselves, painted every wall, and replaced the kitchen cabinets one at a time. When we could not afford new tiles, Robert brought home discarded pieces from construction sites and arranged them into a pattern. Nothing matched perfectly, but everything belonged to us. The basement became Robert's favorite place. It smelled of pine machine oil and the strong coffee he drank from an old red thermos. He built a long workbench against the far wall and lined his tools above it in perfect rows. Whenever something broke in our house or in a neighbor's, Robert carried it downstairs and somehow made it useful again. Michael grew up following his father into that workshop. As a boy, he had soft brown hair that fell across his eyes and an endless stream of questions. He would stand on a wooden crate beside Robert, holding nails and handing him the wrong screwdriver with tremendous confidence. "Measure twice, cut once," Robert taught him. Michael repeated the phrase as if it were a sacred law. I used to sit at the top of the basement stairs and listen to them laugh. There are memories that become more valuable with age because you eventually understand they can never be recreated. For me, the sound of my husband and son laughing beneath our kitchen floor was one of them. Michael had not always been cold. When he was 11, I came home exhausted after losing a patient I had cared for over several months. Michael did not understand exactly why I was crying, but he made me toast, covered it with far too much strawberry jam, and sat beside me until I stopped. On my 50th birthday, he drove 3 hours through a snowstorm because he said no mother should cut her own birthday cake. That was the son I remembered whenever the man he became disappointed me. Robert and I stayed in the house after Michael married Jessica and moved into a new development across town. We watched him start his renovation company, Schmidt Home Solutions. Robert gave him tools, introduced him to contractors, and even guaranteed Michael's first business loan. For a while, the company seemed successful. Michael arrived at family dinners in expensive trucks, wearing polished shoes and talking about new contracts. Jessica posted photographs from resorts and restaurants. They bought a large house with 5 bedrooms, though they only had 1 child. Emily was the brightest part of those years. From the moment she could walk, she treated our house as her second home. She baked cookies with me in the same kitchen where Michael had once done his homework. Robert taught her to identify every tool in the basement, although she preferred painting small wooden birds to building anything practical. Even after Robert died, Emily continued visiting. His death came 3 years before my surgery. He suffered a stroke on a cold November morning while drinking coffee at the kitchen table. One moment, he was complaining that the newspaper had become too expensive, and the next, his cup slipped from his hand. I performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. I had spent my career helping families face death, but no amount of experience prepared me to watch my own husband disappear. After the funeral, the house became painfully quiet. I could hear the furnace starting at night. I could hear branches touching the upstairs windows. For months, I avoided the basement because Robert's jacket still hung beside his workbench. Michael began talking about selling the house almost immediately. At first, his suggestions sounded reasonable. "Mom, this place is too much for one person. You shouldn't be climbing stairs. You could get a nice apartment closer to us." I told him I appreciated his concern, but I was not ready. I was 65, not 95. I still drove, tended my garden, volunteered at the community clinic, and handled every bill without assistance. The house had no mortgage. Robert and I had paid it off years earlier. My pension and savings covered my needs comfortably. There was no practical reason to leave. Michael did not accept that answer. Every few months, he returned to the subject. He brought brochures for retirement communities and sent me listings for smaller condominiums. Jessica once walked through my living room, pointing out which pieces of furniture would not fit in an apartment. "You'll have to simplify eventually," she said. Eventually. That word stayed with me because it did not sound like advice. It sounded like a deadline. Emily never pressured me. She came over on Sunday afternoons, helped me pull weeds, and listened when I told stories about her grandfather. Sometimes, I caught her staring toward the basement door with the same sadness I felt. "Grandpa loved this place," she once said. "Yes," I answered. "But he loved the people in it more." I believed Michael understood that too. I believed his impatience came from worry, not greed. Then 6 months before my surgery, his behavior changed. He began visiting twice a week. He brought groceries I had not requested and insisted on driving me to medical appointments. If a bill arrived while he was present, he studied the envelope before handing it to me. He asked whether my bank accounts still listed him as beneficiary and whether Robert had created a trust. I answered only what seemed necessary. When the cardiologist told me I needed surgery to repair a damaged valve, Michael gripped my hand and promised I would not face it alone. For one brief moment, I felt ashamed of ever doubting him. Then, as we waited for the elevator, he asked Mom, "Where do you keep the deed to the house?" The question came so quickly and casually that another person might have missed its weight. But I had spent 40 years listening to what frightened people said and to what they carefully avoided saying. I looked at my son and saw something in his expression that did not resemble concern. It resembled calculation. I did not answer Michael's question immediately. The elevator doors opened, and 2 nurses stepped out laughing softly over something on a phone. Michael placed one hand against the door to hold it for me. To anyone watching, he looked like a considerate son caring for his aging mother. "The deed," I finally asked. "Why would you need to know where that is?" He shrugged as we entered the elevator. "I'm just trying to make sure everything is organized before your surgery. If something happens, I don't want to spend weeks searching through boxes. If something happens," I repeated. His eyes remained fixed on the descending floor numbers. "You know what I mean." I did know, and that was what frightened me. 3 days later, Michael arrived at my house carrying a thick blue folder. Jessica followed him into the kitchen, wearing a cream-colored coat and the strained smile she used whenever she wanted something. I had just poured myself a cup of tea. Michael moved my mail aside, placed the folder in front of me, and pulled out a stack of documents marked Durable Power of Attorney. "You need to sign these," he said. I put down my cup. Good afternoon to you too. Mom, I'm serious. Your surgery is in less than a month. Jessica sat across from me and folded her hands neatly on the table. We're only trying to protect you, Anna. I began reading the first page. The language was dense, but years of handling medical consent forms had taught me not to be intimidated by legal words. Within minutes, I found clauses allowing Michael to access my bank accounts, manage investments, sell personal property, and conduct real estate transactions in my name. This isn't only about medical decisions, I said. Michael leaned back impatiently. It's a standard form. It gives you control over everything I own, only if you can't manage it yourself. And who decides that? He tapped another paragraph. Your doctor. I kept reading. The document allowed him to act immediately, not only if I became incapacitated. You could sell this house tomorrow. His jaw tightened. Why would I do that? That's what I'm asking. Jessica released a small sigh. Anna, every responsible adult prepares for emergencies. At your age, having your only son manage your finances is perfectly normal. At my age, I was 68, recovering from fatigue caused by a heart condition, not wandering through the streets in my nightgown. I'm not signing this today, I said. Michael's face changed. The helpful expression disappeared so quickly that I wondered how often it had been an act. Then when he demanded, after an attorney reviews it, you don't need to waste money on a lawyer. I already paid to have it prepared. That was your choice. Jessica placed her hand on his arm, but her eyes remained on me. Michael has rearranged his entire schedule for your surgery. He's trying to help, and I am grateful for appropriate help, I replied. But gratitude is not the same as surrendering control. Michael gathered the papers with sharp, angry movements. Fine, he said. When something goes wrong, don't blame me. They left 10 minutes later. Neither of them touched the coffee cake I had placed on the table. That evening, I called Martin Hale, the attorney who had helped Robert and me update our wills nearly a decade earlier. Martin was mostly retired, but he agreed to meet me at his small office the following morning. He read Michael's document, slowly making notes in the margins. Did your son explain that this takes effect immediately? He asked. No. Did he explain that it authorizes him to transfer or sell real estate? No. Martin removed his glasses. Then you were right not to sign it. Hearing the words aloud made my stomach tighten. I told him I still wanted Michael to have limited authority if something went wrong during surgery. I had no other children, and Emily was too young to carry that responsibility alone. But I wanted strict boundaries. Martin prepared a new document. It allowed Michael to communicate with doctors and make specific medical decisions only if I was temporarily unable to speak for myself. It gave him no authority over my home investment savings or retirement income. A separate section stated in plain language that he could not sell mortgage transfer or list any real property belonging to me. Martin arranged for 2 witnesses and a notary. He kept a certified copy in his files and gave me the original in a sealed brown envelope. Store this somewhere secure, he said, and tell at least one trusted person where it is. I thought of Susan, but I hesitated. The fewer people who knew about the safe, the safer it seemed. Robert had installed it years earlier behind a false wooden panel in the basement. He never kept ordinary valuables there. His watch, my jewelry, and our passports stayed in a smaller lockbox upstairs. The basement safe was reserved for documents Robert described as things that matter when somebody stops telling the truth. I had once teased him for being dramatic. I was no longer amused. When I returned home, Michael's truck was parked across the street. He stepped out as I carried the envelope toward the front door. What's that? He asked. Documents from Martin. So, you went behind my back. I consulted my own attorney about my own affairs. Michael followed me into the house. I kept the envelope pressed against my side. Did you sign anything? He asked. Yes. A limited medical power of attorney. Limited how you can speak to my doctors if I cannot speak for myself. Nothing more. He stared at the envelope. Where are you putting it? somewhere safe. I walked downstairs while he remained near the kitchen. I could feel his eyes following me until the basement door closed. I waited several minutes before opening the hidden panel. Then I placed the document in the safe beside Robert's old files and locked it. When I returned upstairs, Michael was standing beside the basement door. "Couldn't find what you needed," I asked. "I was waiting for you." But later that afternoon, I noticed the dust on the basement steps had been disturbed. Someone had gone down after me. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica began asking questions that sounded casual, but never were. Did Robert leave a trust? Was my will stored in the house? Did the basement safe use a key or a combination? I had never told her there was a safe. When I asked how she knew, she smiled and said Michael remembered Robert mentioning 1 year ago. Then Emily arrived unexpectedly one evening. She looked pale and kept glancing toward the driveway. "Grandma, can we talk somewhere private?" I took her into Robert's old workshop and closed the basement door. Emily lowered her voice. "Dad's company is in trouble. Serious trouble." "How serious? I don't know exactly. But Mom said they could lose everything." I reached for her hand. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Dad keeps talking about your house." Tears gathered in her eyes. He said it was the only asset in the family that could save him. I wanted to reassure her. I wanted to say Michael would never steal from his own mother. But I remembered the papers, the questions, and the disturbed dust on the basement steps. When did he say that? Last night. He thought I was asleep. A car door slammed outside. Emily flinched. "That's him," she whispered. "Please don't tell Dad I warned you." Michael had not merely been preparing for the possibility that I might not survive surgery. He had been preparing for the opportunity created while I was unconscious. And suddenly, I understood that the document in my basement safe might be the only thing standing between my son and everything Robert and I had built. On the morning of my surgery, Michael arrived at my house before sunrise. The streetlights were still glowing through a thin layer of fog when I heard his truck pull into the driveway. I had been awake since 3, sitting at the kitchen table with my overnight bag beside me and Robert's wedding ring hanging from a chain around my neck. Michael entered without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Decaf for you?" he said, placing one in front of me. "Just the way you like it." The gesture was so familiar that it weakened my suspicions for a moment. I looked at him and remembered the boy who had once brought me toast when I was grieving. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that boy still existed beneath the impatience and secrecy. "You didn't have to come this early," I said. "I told you I'd take care of everything." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they made me think of Emily's warning. Before leaving, I gave Michael my spare house key. I told him to collect my mail, water the plants, and check the furnace if the temperature dropped. "That's all I need you to do," I said carefully. He gave me a wounded look. "I understand, Mom." At the hospital, Michael stayed beside me through registration. He answered questions I had not asked him to answer and repeatedly reminded the nurses that he held my medical power of attorney. I corrected him each time. "A limited medical power of attorney," I said. "It only applies if I cannot speak for myself." The 3rd time I said it, the admissions nurse looked directly at Michael. "Mrs. Schmidt is currently making her own decisions," she told him. His smile became tight. "Of course she is. Jessica arrived shortly before the surgical team came for me." She kissed my cheek and said everything would be fine. Yet her attention kept shifting toward Michael's phone. When the orderly unlocked the wheels of my bed, Michael leaned down and wrapped his arms around me. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too." That was the most painful truth of all. Even after every warning, I loved him. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I looked back. Michael stood with one hand raised, appearing every bit like a frightened son, watching his mother disappear behind a pair of white doors. What happened after that was reconstructed later from phone records, bank transfers, security footage, emails, and the words Michael and Jessica spoke when they believed no one could hear them. My surgery began at 8:14 that morning. At 8:27, Michael and Jessica left the hospital. They did not go home. They drove directly to my house. Michael used the spare key I had placed in his hand less than 2 hours earlier. Jessica carried empty file boxes, a laptop, and a portable scanner. They began in my bedroom. They emptied the drawers of Robert's old desk, opened my jewelry box, and searched the pockets of coats hanging in the closet. They removed insurance policies, tax returns, bank statements, and several birthday cards containing samples of my handwriting. Then they moved to the small office beside the dining room. Michael found closing documents from when Robert and I refinanced the house 15 years earlier. My signature appeared on nearly every page. Jessica scanned them. According to the later timeline, they spent 43 minutes upstairs before going down to the basement. Michael searched Robert's workbench, pulled open every drawer, and removed tools from the pegboard. He tapped sections of the walls looking for a hollow space. Jessica opened old paint cans and storage bins. They found the wooden panel that concealed some electrical wiring, but not the separate false wall behind the tall tool cabinet. The safe remained hidden. What they did find was more than enough for the first part of their plan. Old documents bearing my legal signature, and Robert's printer, which Michael had connected to a new laptop. The durable power of attorney Michael originally brought to my kitchen had already been saved on that computer. He changed the date and printed a clean copy. This version contained none of the restrictions Martin had written into the legitimate document. It authorized Michael to control my accounts, sell my property, and sign real estate documents in my name. He practiced my signature repeatedly on a yellow legal pad. Later, a handwriting expert would point out the places where Michael pressed too hard and paused between letters. My genuine signature flowed from years of repetition. His imitation looked accurate from a distance, but strained under magnification. Jessica photographed the final version and sent it to Linda Parker. Linda ran a mobile notary service and had known Jessica through a local business networking group. She had never met me. She did not watch me sign anything. Yet shortly before 11 that morning, she placed her stamp on the document and certified that Anna Schmidt had personally appeared before her. At that exact time, I was unconscious with my chest open in an operating room 14 miles away. Michael had not begun looking for a buyer that morning. He had already found one. Charles Whitmore owned a development company that had been purchasing older homes in my neighborhood. His plan was to combine several lots, demolish the existing houses, and build luxury townhomes. Michael had contacted him 2 weeks before my surgery. My house was worth approximately $510,000. Michael agreed to sell it for $365,000 in exchange for an accelerated closing and minimal questions. Charles knew the property had not been publicly listed. He knew the owner was an older widow. One email later recovered by Patricia contained a message from Michael stating, "My mother will be unavailable on the closing date due to a medical procedure, so everything must go through me." Charles replied, "As long as the POA clears title, I don't care where she is." The closing agent received the forged document electronically. Michael signed the sale papers as my attorney in fact. Charles wired the purchase money shortly after noon. By then, my surgical team had encountered unexpected bleeding. The operation, originally expected to last 3 hours, continued past 5. Susan sat alone in the hospital waiting room because Michael had told her only immediate family could be present. When she texted him asking for an update, he replied that he was speaking with the surgeon. He was actually sitting inside his truck outside a bank. The money did not remain in one place for long. Michael transferred a large portion into the account for Schmidt Home Solutions. He paid overdue contractors, satisfied part of a private loan, and sent money to 2 creditors who had threatened legal action. Jessica transferred another amount into a personal account that had been opened only days earlier. They were not protecting my future. They were using it to erase their past. At 2:46 that afternoon, Charles submitted the transfer documents for recording. His employees scheduled a survey and ordered new locks for the following morning. At 3:18, Michael returned to the hospital. My surgeon met him in a private consultation room and explained that the procedure had succeeded, though I would require careful monitoring. Michael thanked him and asked how long confusion from anesthesia might last. The surgeon said temporary disorientation was possible. Michael then asked how doctors determined whether an older patient could still make financial decisions. The surgeon found the question strange enough to record it in his notes. When I finally opened my eyes, Michael was sitting beside my bed. He held my hand and told me the surgery had gone well. I believed the worst was behind me. I did not know that while doctors had been fighting to save my heart, my son had been selling the home in which that heart had lived for 36 years. And before I was strong enough to sit up, strangers already had legal papers claiming that everything Robert and I built belonged to them. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the sound of a machine measuring my heartbeat. The second was Michael's hand around mine. For several seconds, I did not know where I was. My throat felt scraped raw, and a deep pressure spread beneath the bandages across my chest. The room floated in and out of focus. Pale walls, clear tubes, a nurse adjusting something near my shoulder. Then Michael's face appeared above me. "You made it, Mom," he said. His eyes looked wet. At the time, I mistook fear of being caught for fear of losing me. I tried to speak, but only a rough whisper came out. The house. I meant to ask whether he had locked the back door. It was an ordinary question born from habit. Michael's fingers tightened around mine. "Everything is handled." I drifted back to sleep before I could ask what that meant. The next morning, I was moved from intensive care to a private recovery room. The anesthesia had mostly cleared, although every breath still hurt. A nurse named Caroline helped me sit up and explained that the surgery had been successful. "You gave everyone a scare," she said. "But your heart is strong." My heart might have been strong. The rest of me felt as fragile as glass. Michael arrived shortly after 10 with Jessica. She carried a black overnight bag and placed it in the closet without opening it. "Where are my things?" I asked. "That's what I brought," she replied. I packed a blue suitcase. Jessica glanced at Michael. "This is easier." Before I could question her, my phone began vibrating on the bedside table. Susan's name flashed across the screen. Michael reached for it. "You should rest." I picked it up before he could. Susan spoke so quickly that I could barely understand her. "Anna, thank God. I've been calling since yesterday. There are men at your house. They changed something on the front door, and there's a sign in the yard." "What kind of sign?" She hesitated. "A sold sign." For a moment, I heard nothing except the monitor beside me. "That isn't possible." I walked over and asked them what they were doing. One man said the property had been purchased by Whitmore Development. "They're measuring the yard right now." I looked at Michael. He was standing near the window with his hands in his pockets. Jessica stared down at her phone. "Susan, I said I'll call you back." My hand was shaking when I ended the call. "Tell me she's mistaken." Michael did not answer. "Tell me you did not sell my house." He exhaled slowly as if I were the one making the conversation difficult. "Mom, you're upset. Did you sell it?" "Yes." The word entered me more sharply than any surgical instrument had. I gripped the blanket. While I was unconscious, I made a decision that should have been made years ago. You had no authority. Michael pulled several folded pages from his jacket and placed them on the bed. "You signed a durable power of attorney." I forced myself to read through the blur in my eyes. The document carried my name and what appeared to be my signature. It granted him control over nearly everything I owned. This is not the document I signed. It is. No. Martin prepared a limited medical power of attorney. Jessica stepped closer. Anna, you were under a great deal of stress. Maybe you don't remember all the documents. I looked at her. I remember exactly what I signed. Michael lowered his voice. The anesthesia can cause confusion. I am not confused. No one said you were. You just did. Caroline entered to check my blood pressure. Michael immediately changed his tone. My mother is having some trouble remembering the paperwork she completed before surgery, he told her. I stared at him in disbelief. Caroline looked at me, not him. Mrs. Schmidt, do you know where you are? Allegheny General Hospital. I had valve surgery yesterday. It is Thursday morning, and my son has just told me he sold my house using a document I did not sign. Michael's face reddened. Caroline recorded my blood pressure, which had risen dramatically, and asked both Michael and Jessica to step into the hallway. Michael refused at first, but she insisted that I needed calm. Once the door closed, Caroline leaned closer. Do you feel safe with your son making decisions for you? The question nearly broke me. No, I whispered. She wrote something in my chart and promised to contact the patient advocate. Michael returned 20 minutes later. His performance of concern had disappeared. You didn't need to involve the hospital, he said. You sold my home. I saved you from a burden. How much? What? How much did you sell it for? He named a figure so low that I thought I had misheard him. That house is worth more than $500,000. Only if you spend months preparing it and waiting for the right buyer. Where is the money? I'm managing it. My chest tightened. It belongs to me. It's being used for your care. I have insurance. I have retirement income. What care? Michael glanced toward the door before answering. We found a very good assisted living community. They have nurses, meals, transportation, everything you need. You already chose a place. You can't live alone after heart surgery. That is for my doctor and me to decide. Mom, be realistic. Jessica opened the black bag and removed 3 plain outfits, a nightgown, slippers, and a toothbrush. That was all they had brought from the home where I had lived for 36 years. Where are my photographs? I asked. My jewelry? Robert's things? We'll sort through everything later, Jessica said. The ease in her voice chilled me. She spoke as though my life had already ended and she had been assigned to clear away the remains. I demanded my original power of attorney. Michael claimed he had never seen another document. When I said it was stored safely, his expression shifted. Where I turned my face toward the window, he came closer. Mom, if there are important papers in the house you need to tell me. You have already taken enough. That afternoon, Emily appeared at the doorway carrying flowers. Relief crossed her face when she saw me awake. Grandma! She took one step into the room before Michael blocked her. You have class, he said. I wanted to see her. You've seen her. I want to talk to her alone. Michael's voice hardened. Not today. Emily looked at me over his shoulder. Her eyes were swollen as if she had been crying. Did you know I asked her? Her lips parted, but Michael seized her arm. She doesn't know anything about adult matters. Let her answer. Jessica moved between us and told Emily to wait in the hall. Before Michael pushed the door closed, Emily looked directly at me and silently formed 2 words. I'm sorry. That was when I understood she had tried to warn me because she had known something terrible was coming. She had simply been powerless to stop it. But Michael was wrong about one thing. I was not powerless. The real document was still inside the basement safe, and if Michael was demanding to know where I had hidden it, Then he had not found it. I closed my eyes and pretended exhaustion. For the first time since waking, I allowed my son to believe exactly what he wanted to believe, that I was weak, confused, and defeated. Inside, I was already planning how to get my life back. The following morning, I asked to speak with the hospital patient advocate without Michael present. Her name was Denise Walker, a composed woman in her 50s who listened without interrupting while I explained the forged document, the sale, and Michael's attempt to describe me as confused. She took notes, asked careful questions, and arranged for a physician who was not part of my surgical team to evaluate my mental capacity. Michael was furious when he found out. "You're creating unnecessary drama," he said from the foot of my bed. "I'm creating a record. You just had major surgery. You should focus on recovering." I would be recovering if my son hadn't sold my home. Jessica stood near the window scrolling through her phone. She had hardly looked at me all morning. The evaluating physician arrived after lunch. Dr. Samuel Green was older than Michael and younger than me, with silver beginning to show at his temples. He asked everyone else to leave. For nearly 40 minutes, he questioned me about the date, my medical history, my finances, and the events leading to my hospitalization. He asked me to remember a list of words, interpret simple situations, and explain the consequences of signing legal documents. I answered every question. When he finished, he closed his folder. "Mrs. Schmidt, you are understandably distressed, but I see no evidence that you lack decision-making capacity. Would you put that in writing?" "Yes." Relief moved through me so strongly that I almost cried. Michael had tried to turn the temporary weakness of my body into proof that my mind no longer belonged to me. Dr. Green's report did not restore my house, but it removed one of the weapons my son intended to use. My surgeon wanted me to remain in the hospital another day. Michael assumed he would collect me the following afternoon and take me directly to the assisted living community he had chosen. I allowed him to believe that. Early the next morning, Susan arrived with a loose gray dress, comfortable shoes, and the red wool coat I kept at her house for winter walks. She signed the discharge papers as the person taking responsibility for driving me home. "You're sure about this?" she asked as she helped me into a wheelchair. "No," I admitted, "but I need to see what they've done." The trip through Pittsburgh felt longer than usual. Every bump pulled at the incision in my chest. Susan drove slowly, keeping both hands tight around the steering wheel. When we turned onto my street, I saw the sign before I saw the house. Sold. The red letters seemed obscene against the white post. A dark SUV was parked in my driveway. Two men wearing reflective vests were measuring the width of the front yard. Bright orange flags had been pushed into the grass Robert had once trimmed every Saturday morning. Susan stopped at the curb. "Anna, maybe you should stay in the car." "No." I moved carefully up the walkway, one hand pressed against my coat. The front porch looked the same, but the brass lock Robert installed was gone. In its place was a new electronic keypad. I tried my key anyway. It did not fit. A stack of cardboard boxes stood beneath the porch awning. One had split open, exposing kitchen towels, old books, and framed photographs. I bent down despite the pain in my chest. My wedding portrait lay face down near a trash container. The glass had cracked across Robert's smile. For several seconds I could not breathe. Susan picked it up and wiped dirt from the frame. "They threw this away," I whispered. "Don't lift anything," she said gently. The front door opened, and a tall man in an expensive navy overcoat stepped outside. I recognized Charles Whitmore from real estate advertisements around the neighborhood. "Can I help you?" he asked. "This is my home." His expression changed when he heard my name. "Mrs. Schmidt, you know who I am. I understand this is difficult, but the property was legally purchased. It was sold with forged documents while I was undergoing heart surgery." Charles looked toward the workers before lowering his voice. "That is a matter between you and your son. My company completed a valid transaction. You bought a $500,000 home for $365,000, without speaking to its owner. We worked through your authorized representative. You mean the man who forged my signature? He stepped back toward the door. You need to contact an attorney. I need to enter my house. You no longer have permission. Hearing those words on my own porch awakened something fierce inside me. I took out my phone and called the police. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. Michael arrived 5 minutes after them, as though Charles had been expecting trouble and knew exactly whom to contact. Michael hurried toward me, wearing an expression of practiced concern. Mom, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in the hospital. I was discharged. You should have called me, so you could take me somewhere I never agreed to live. One officer asked us to explain the situation. Charles produced a recorded deed and the forged power of attorney. I showed them Dr. Green's assessment and described the legitimate document in my basement safe. The older officer studied both sides before speaking. Mrs. Schmidt, I'm sorry, but the deed has been recorded. We can't decide ownership here on the sidewalk. This will have to go through civil court. I am telling you, a crime occurred, and you should report the suspected forgery. But right now, Mr. Whitmore's company appears as the owner, so I cannot enter. Not without permission. Michael stepped closer. Mom, come with me. Your room at Meadow Ridge is ready. My room. It's a good place. You'll have meals, medical assistance. You arranged it before my surgery. He lowered his voice. I knew you would resist. You planned to remove me from my home whether I survived the operation or not. His mouth tightened. Stop making me sound like a monster. I don't have to. You're doing that yourself. Jessica remained inside Michael's truck. She did not get out or look in my direction. I turned toward the basement window near the side of the house. From the street, it looked like a narrow rectangle of dark glass beneath the shrubs. Behind that glass were Robert's workbench, the hidden wall, and the only document that proved Michael's authority had never included my property. The safe was still there. I knew, because Michael was still trying to learn where I had hidden it. Charles's workers had not yet begun clearing the basement, but the orange markings in the yard told me demolition preparations were already underway. If they emptied the house before I obtained legal access, the safe could be discovered destroyed or removed. Michael reached for my arm. I pulled away. I'm not going to Meadow Ridge. Then where will you go? Susan stepped beside me. She's coming home with me. Michael looked at her with open irritation. This is a family matter. Susan placed Robert's damaged photograph inside my bag. Family is supposed to protect you when you're helpless, she said. Not sell your house. I stayed with Susan that night in the guest room overlooking her garden. She brought me soup, organized my medication, and helped me sit upright without straining my incision. After midnight, I heard her moving downstairs. When I joined her, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. I've been writing down every name, date, and document you mentioned, she said. You should be asleep. So should you. I sat across from her. For the first time since the hospital, I allowed myself to cry. Not quietly or gracefully. I cried for Robert, for the broken wedding photograph, and for the son who had treated my survival as an inconvenience. Susan reached across the table and held my hand. Tomorrow, we find you a lawyer. I looked through her window at the dark outline of my house next door. Michael believed changing the locks had ended the fight. But a lock only matters when the truth is outside. Mine was still waiting behind the basement wall, and I intended to reach it before anyone else did. My phone rang at 6:12 the next morning. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another call from the hospital or Meadow Ridge. Then a whisper came through the speaker. Grandma, it's me, Emily. I'm using my friend's phone. Dad took mine. I sat upright too quickly and felt a sharp pull beneath my bandages. Why would he take your phone? Because he knows I warned you. Her voice shook. I could hear traffic in the background and guessed she was standing somewhere outside. Are you safe? Yes. I'm near campus. Dad thinks I'm in class. Tell me exactly what happened. Emily went silent for several seconds. His company is worse than I told you. He owes more than $400,000. The figure stunned me. How? He borrowed money to expand. Then 2 renovation projects failed inspection and 1 client sued him. He started using deposits from new jobs to pay for old ones. A familiar sadness settled over me. Robert had taught Michael how to build things, but somewhere along the way, our son had become more interested in appearing successful than in doing honest work. Your mother knows she knows everything. Emily told me about the arguments she had overheard through her bedroom wall. Credit cards were maxed out. Their mortgage payments were late. Michael's business accounts had been nearly empty before the money from my house arrived. Mom said they could lose everything, Emily continued. Dad said your house was the only asset left in the family. My house was never his asset. I know. Her voice cracked. One night, Mom said that if the surgery left you confused, they could have you declared incompetent. Dad said it wouldn't matter because the sale would already be finished. I closed my eyes. The cruelty of hearing those words from my granddaughter was different from discovering the forged papers. Paper could be cold. Legal language could distance a person from what had been done. But Emily had heard her father discuss my possible incapacity as an opportunity. Why didn't you tell me all of this sooner? I asked gently. I was scared. Dad said if I interfered, he'd stop paying my tuition. He said I'd ruin the whole family. You did not ruin anything. I should have done more. You are 19 years old. None of this belongs on your shoulders. Emily began crying. After a moment, she said, There's something else. I heard Dad talking to Mr. Whitmore last night. They're clearing out the basement tomorrow morning. My grip tightened around the phone. Are you certain? Yes. Mr. Whitmore wants everything removed before the demolition inspection. Did your father mention the safe? He said there might be documents hidden downstairs. He told them to call him if they find anything locked. My pulse quickened. Emily, listen to me. Do not confront your father. Do not search his office and do not put yourself at risk. But I want to help. You already have. I told her to remain on campus and call Susan's number if Michael tried to isolate her again. Before ending the call, Emily made me promise I would not reveal her location. Susan found me sitting at the kitchen table with the untouched coffee she had poured half an hour earlier. We have one day, I told her. She did not ask what I meant. She picked up her phone and called Patricia Morgan. Patricia had represented Susan's older sister in a financial exploitation case several years earlier. Her office was in downtown Pittsburgh, but when Susan explained that I had just undergone heart surgery, Patricia agreed to meet us at Susan's house. She arrived before noon, carrying a leather briefcase and moving with the brisk confidence of someone accustomed to emergencies. She was 55, with dark hair cut neatly at her jaw and a gaze that made it difficult to hide anything. For nearly an hour, I told her everything. She reviewed the copy of the alleged power of attorney Dr. Green's capacity assessment and photographs Susan had taken of the sold sign, changed locks and boxes on the porch. Do you have a copy of the legitimate power of attorney? She asked. Martin Hale kept a certified copy, but his office is closed today. The original is inside the basement safe, and the safe contains other documents. I believe so. Robert kept private records there. I don't know exactly what remains. Does your son know where it is? No. Patricia studied the forged document again. There are already serious problems here. A transfer completed this quickly at that price, while the owner was undergoing surgery, should have triggered more scrutiny. But we need the original document, and anything else showing your son knew his authority was limited. They're clearing the basement tomorrow. Patricia closed her briefcase. Then we don't wait. She called Charles Whitmore from Susan's kitchen. At first, he refused to discuss anything without his attorney. Patricia informed him that removing my personal property after receiving notice of a fraud claim could expose him to additional liability. I am requesting one supervised visit, she said. Mrs. Schmidt will retrieve personal documents and effects. Your representative may remain with us the entire time. His voice was loud enough that I could hear part of his response. No, absolutely not. She already caused a scene at the property. Patricia remained calm. Then I will request an emergency order today and include your refusal in the filing. There was a long pause. Charles agreed to give us 30 minutes at 4 that afternoon. Susan drove while Patricia followed in her car. The closer we came to my street, the more difficult it became to breathe. I kept reminding myself that the pain was from surgery, not fear. Charles waited on the porch with a woman named Rachel from his real estate office. He looked irritated rather than concerned. You have 30 minutes, he said. Nothing attached to the property can be removed. Personal documents are not part of the real estate, Patricia replied. He made us sign an entry log, then unlocked the door. The inside of my home barely resembled itself. Furniture had been pushed against walls. Cabinet doors stood open. Labels had been attached to boxes, donate storage disposal. The clock Robert repaired for our 25th anniversary was missing from the mantel. I wanted to stop and search for every memory, but Patricia touched my arm. The basement first. Rachel followed us down the stairs. Charles remained close behind. The air smelled of dust and damp wood. Robert's workbench had been stripped of several tools and drawers hung open. Someone had pulled boxes from the shelves and scattered their contents across the floor. I crossed the room to the tall tool cabinet. Charles watched me carefully. There's nothing behind there, he said. I looked at him. Then you won't mind if we check. The cabinet was heavy. Susan could not help because of my condition, so Patricia and Rachel pushed it aside. Behind it was a wall of narrow wooden panels Robert had built to match the rest of the workshop. I ran my fingers along the third panel until I found a small indentation beneath the trim. Click. The panel released. Behind it sat a dark steel safe bolted into the foundation. No one spoke. For a moment, all I could see was Robert kneeling in that same spot years earlier, telling me that some truths should be protected until the day they were needed. Charles stepped forward. What's inside? That Patricia said, positioning herself between him and the safe, is what we're about to find out. I knelt carefully and turned the dial toward the date Robert and I had been married. Charles's confident expression disappeared, and as the lock released with a heavy metallic sound, I realized he was not merely curious about what my husband had hidden. He was afraid of it. The safe door resisted at first. Robert had warned me that the hinges became stiff when they were not used for long periods. I pulled again, ignoring the pain beneath my ribs, until the heavy steel door opened with a low groan. Inside were several sealed envelopes, a small metal cash box, 2 binders, and a compact recording device connected to a black cable running through the back of the safe. Patricia knelt beside me. Don't remove anything yet, she said. We need to document exactly how it was found. She photographed the safe, its contents, and the hidden compartment. Rachel Charles's representative stood several feet away and recorded the process on her phone. Charles moved closer. I have a right to know if any of that belongs to the property. Patricia did not look at him. Documents belonging to Mrs. Schmidt are not part of your purchase. The safe is bolted to the foundation. The contents are not. I reached for the first envelope. My name appeared across the front in Martin Hale's handwriting. Inside was the original limited medical power of attorney. Patricia put on a pair of gloves and unfolded it across Robert's workbench. She read every page, then compared it with the copy Michael had used to sell the house. The difference was undeniable. The legitimate document became effective only if I was unable to communicate with my doctors. It granted Michael no authority over my finances. It specifically prohibited him from selling, transferring, mortgaging, or listing my real estate. Patricia pointed to the notarization. This was signed 6 days after the document your son submitted was supposedly prepared. What does that mean? Susan asked. It means Michael cannot claim Anna accidentally signed both versions during the same meeting. Martin's records will show which document was legally executed and who witnessed it. I opened another envelope containing signature samples from previous estate documents, all notarized years earlier. Patricia compared them with the signature on the forged power of attorney. To an untrained eye, they look similar, she said. But look here. She indicated the capital A in my first name. In my genuine signature, the lower stroke continued directly into the next letter. On Michael's version, the line stopped and restarted. He had copied the shape of my name. He had not captured the movement of my hand. Charles folded his arms. This proves there are 2 documents. It doesn't prove your son forged anything. Patricia looked toward the small recorder inside the safe. Perhaps we should see what that contains. I had almost forgotten about Robert's camera system. Years earlier, after tools began disappearing from garages in our neighborhood, Robert installed a tiny camera above his basement workbench. The cable ran through the wall to a recording unit protected inside the safe. He chose that arrangement so an intruder could not simply take the footage. After the thefts stopped, I assumed Robert had disconnected it. Apparently, he had not. The device was plugged into a hidden power line, and a green light still glowed beside the memory card slot. Patricia photographed the recorder before removing the card. Do you have a computer? She asked Rachel. There's a laptop in my car. Rachel looked at Charles for permission. He hesitated, then nodded. While she went outside, I turned to the binders. The first contained household records, insurance policies, and receipts from renovations. The second was labeled Michael in Robert's handwriting. My hands began to shake. Inside were copies of bank statements from 6 years earlier. Several withdrawals had been circled in red. Checks made out to Michael's company carried Robert's signature, but I recognized the same unnatural pauses I had seen on the forged power of attorney. A handwritten note from Robert was clipped to the first page. Anna does not know. I confronted Michael on March 12th. He admitted taking the money and promised repayment. I chose not to report him because I believed he was frightened and ashamed. If it happens again, do not protect him from the consequences. The total was $48,000. I sat down on Robert's old stool. He stole from his father, too. Susan placed a hand on my shoulder. I remembered the year those withdrawals had occurred. Robert had become quiet and withdrawn for several months. He told me the business had suffered unexpected expenses. We canceled a vacation and postponed replacing our roof. All that time, he had been carrying Michael's betrayal alone. He should have told me, I whispered. Maybe he thought he was protecting you, Susan said. He was protecting Michael. The distinction mattered. Rachel returned with the laptop. Patricia inserted the memory card and opened the most recent recording folder. The files were organized by date and time. The final date was the morning of my surgery. My breath caught. Patricia opened the first video. The image showed Robert's basement from a high angle. Michael entered the frame carrying a laptop. Jessica followed with a portable scanner and several file boxes. For the next 12 minutes, we watched them search the workshop. The camera captured Michael pulling open drawers, tapping the walls, and cursing when he failed to find the safe. Jessica sat at the workbench, scanning old documents that contained my signature. Then Michael connected Robert's printer. His voice came clearly through the camera's microphone. If we can't find the original, it doesn't matter. Linda's already agreed to stamp the new one. Jessica looked toward the basement stairs. What if your mother remembers the restrictions? Michael laughed. She'll be medicated for days. By the time she understands what happened, the house will belong to Whitmore. Charles stepped toward the laptop. That has nothing to do with me. Patricia raised one hand. Do not touch the computer. The video continued. Michael practiced my signature on a yellow legal pad. Jessica corrected the angle of the final letter and told him to use less pressure. What if Anna fights it? She asked. Michael placed the forged document beside the printer. Then we tell everyone she's confused. She's almost 70. She just lost Dad, and heart surgery can affect the brain. People will believe us before they believe her. The room around me disappeared. I no longer saw Charles, Rachel, or even Patricia. I saw only my son sitting at his father's workbench, calmly preparing to erase me from my own life. Jessica leaned closer to him in the video. And the money? I transfer it the second Whitmore wires it. Once it's gone, she can scream all she wants. Charles's face had turned pale. Patricia paused the recording. This is evidence of forgery, financial exploitation, and conspiracy, she said. And now that you have witnessed it, Mr. Whitmore, any attempt to remove or destroy property in this basement will create additional problems for you. He looked at Rachel. No one touches anything until legal reviews this. His tone had changed completely. At the bottom of the safe beneath the recorder, I found one final envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly, and Robert's handwriting crossed the front. For Anna, when loving him is no longer enough. I opened it with trembling fingers. Robert wrote that he had spent years hoping Michael would become the man they raised him to be. He confessed that hiding the earlier theft had been a mistake. By protecting our son from accountability, Robert feared he had taught Michael that love would always rescue him from consequences. Then came the sentence that broke what remained of my heart. If he turns against you, Anna, please do what I was too weak to do. Tell the truth. Protect yourself. Loving our son does not require you to let him destroy you. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. Not because Robert had predicted Michael's betrayal, but because even from beyond the grave, my husband had understood the battle I would face inside myself. Patricia gathered the documents recorder and memory card into evidence bags. Rachel signed a list confirming every item removed from the safe. As we walked upstairs, Charles remained in the basement, staring at the hidden compartment that had just transformed his profitable purchase into a legal disaster. Michael believed he had taken my house, my money, and my credibility. But Robert had left me something stronger than anger. He had left me the truth, and by sunset, Patricia was preparing to place that truth before a judge. Patricia worked through the night. By 8 the next morning, she had prepared an emergency petition asking the county court to stop Charles from demolishing, altering, or transferring my property. She also requested that any remaining proceeds from the sale be frozen until the court determined whether the transaction had been fraudulent. I sat at Susan's kitchen table in my robe, sorting medication into a plastic organizer while Patricia spoke to me on speakerphone. We have strong evidence, she said, but an emergency order is temporary. It preserves the situation. It does not decide the entire case. How quickly can we get one? I'm asking for a hearing today. I looked through Susan's window toward my house. A truck bearing Whitmore Development's logo was parked outside, but no one entered. Charles had apparently kept his promise to pause the work after seeing the basement video. I did not mistake caution for honesty. He was not protecting me. He was protecting himself. At 10:30, Patricia called again. The judge had granted a temporary injunction. For 14 days, Charles could not demolish the house, remove fixtures, dispose of my remaining belongings, or sell the property to someone else. The court also ordered the bank handling the transaction to preserve whatever funds remained traceable to the sale. I closed my eyes as relief passed through me. It was not victory, but for the first time since my surgery, the destruction had stopped. Susan opened a bottle of sparkling cider she had been saving for Christmas. "This deserves something," she said, filling 2 glasses. I lifted mine carefully. "To temporary survival, to making temporary permanent." Our celebration lasted less than an hour. Charles's attorney sent Patricia a letter threatening to sue me for financial losses caused by the delayed development. The letter claimed Charles was an innocent purchaser who had relied on properly notarized documents. Patricia read part of it aloud and then laughed without humor. He purchased a property worth over $500,000 for $365,000 without meeting its owner while knowing she was undergoing surgery. Can he still claim he knew nothing? He can claim anything. The question is what the evidence supports. She had already requested Charles's emails, closing records, and communications with Michael. She also contacted Martin Hale, who provided his certified copy of my legitimate power of attorney, and sworn statements from both witnesses who watched me sign it. Martin sounded devastated when he called me. "I should have insisted on keeping the original in my office," he said. "This is not your fault. I knew Michael was pressuring you. So did I. I simply didn't believe he would go this far." That sentence became a familiar burden. Everyone had seen part of the danger, but none of us had understood its size. The bank records began arriving 2 days later. Michael had moved the money rapidly, but not carefully. Of the $365,000 Charles wired, nearly $230,000 went into Schmidt Home Solutions. Within hours, Michael paid overdue subcontractors, equipment loans, legal bills, and a private lender who had threatened to seize his business assets. Jessica transferred $60,000 into an account opened in her maiden name. Another $25,000 was used to bring their home mortgage current. Only a small portion remained available to freeze. I sat in Patricia's office staring at the transaction list. He spent my house in one afternoon. He distributed the proceeds, Patricia corrected gently. "That does not mean the money cannot be traced or recovered. What happens to the contractors he paid? Some of them may have done honest work. That is one reason these cases become complicated. The court will have to determine who received funds in good faith and where recovery is legally possible." Even after what Michael had done, I did not want innocent workers to lose money. I hated that his dishonesty had spread beyond our family, touching people who might never have known where their payments came from. Michael continued building his defense around my age. His attorney requested access to my medical records and suggested that my memory had been impaired before surgery. Patricia responded with Dr. Green's assessment, the hospital notes showing I had repeatedly corrected Michael's description of his authority and records from my cardiologist, confirming I had made my own medical decisions. I underwent another independent cognitive evaluation. The psychologist asked me to draw a clock recall, names, explain financial scenarios, and recount the sequence of events surrounding the sale. I resented having to prove my competence, but Patricia reminded me why the documentation mattered. "Michael wants this case to become a debate about your memory," she said. "We will make it a case about his evidence." The psychologist concluded that I was fully capable of managing my legal, medical, and financial affairs. That evening, Michael called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but Patricia had advised me to preserve every communication. Pennsylvania required consent from all parties for certain recordings, so instead of secretly recording him, I put the call on speaker while Susan listened and documented the conversation. "Mom, he said you need to stop this." "Stop what?" "Trying to destroy me. I did not forge your signature. I was desperate. It was the first admission he had made, though he quickly tried to retreat from it. I was desperate to make sure you were safe. You sold my home below market value and used the money to pay your debts. I was going to replace it. With what? When the company recovered, you gambled my entire life on a business that was already failing." His breathing grew heavier. "Do you understand what happens if you continue? I lose the company. Jessica and I lose our home. Emily loses her tuition. You made those choices. You're my mother, and you were my son when you left me homeless." Silence followed. Then his tone softened. "Please, Mom. Drop the case. Tell Patricia you signed the broad power of attorney and forgot. Whitmore will let you keep some of the money. I'll find you a better apartment." He was asking me to lie so he could preserve the lie that had already stolen my house. "No." His voice changed instantly. "You're choosing a building over your family. I am choosing the truth. If Emily takes your side, I will stop paying for school. Do not punish her for your actions. She belongs with us, not you. She is not property." The anger in his voice deepened. "You think that video makes you untouchable? You have no idea what I can prove about your health. People saw how unstable you were after Dad died." Susan wrote every word on her legal pad. I kept my voice calm. "Are you threatening to have me declared incompetent? I'm telling you how this will look. It will look like a man trying to silence the mother he robbed." Michael ended the call. Minutes later, a message arrived. "You should have accepted the care I arranged. Things are going to get much harder now. Patricia instructed me to save screenshots and forward the entire exchange to her. She also advised Susan and me not to open the door if Michael appeared." I lay awake that night listening to every car that passed outside. The injunction had stopped Charles's workers, but it had not stopped my son. Michael had spent years believing that fear, guilt, and family loyalty would keep me obedient. Now that those weapons had failed, I did not know what he would try next. But I had learned something from Robert's letter. Truth did not remove fear. It simply gave me a reason not to surrender to it. 3 days after Michael's threatening call, Patricia arranged a settlement meeting at her office. She warned me not to expect an apology. "His attorney requested this meeting because the evidence is getting worse for him," she said. "That does not mean Michael is ready to accept responsibility. I understand, but some foolish part of me still hoped that when my son saw me sitting across from him, not through a hospital doorway, not over a telephone, he might finally understand what he had done." Patricia's conference room was small and deliberately plain. A long wooden table occupied most of the space. A box of tissues sat in the center, which told me she had witnessed many families destroy themselves in that room. Michael arrived with his attorney, Richard Cole. Jessica followed several minutes later with a different lawyer. That alone revealed the growing distance between them. Michael looked older than he had a week earlier. His eyes were shadowed, and the confidence he usually wore had disappeared. When he saw me, he stopped near the doorway. "Mom." I did not respond. Jessica sat at the opposite end of the table and avoided looking at either of us. Richard began by describing the sale as a tragic misunderstanding, created by financial pressure, incomplete communication, and concern for an elderly parent's welfare. Patricia let him finish. Then she placed 2 documents on the table. One was my legitimate limited power of attorney. The other was Michael's forgery. "This is not incomplete communication," she said. "These documents are materially different. Your client submitted the false one while Mrs. Schmidt was unconscious." Richard glanced at Michael. Michael leaned forward. "I was trying to protect the family." "Which family?" I asked. "All of us. You left me without a home. I had arranged a place for you. A room I never requested. A safe room with nurses and meals. You could have been comfortable. I was already comfortable. In my own house." His face tightened. "You don't understand what I was dealing with." "Then explain it." Michael looked toward his attorney, but Richard did not stop him. "My company was collapsing," he said. "One project failed because a subcontractor cut corners. Another client refused to pay. People were threatening lawsuits. I had employees with families depending on me, so you used my home to save your business. I was going to pay everything back. When the company recovered, you sold a house you did not own for $145,000 below its value. How are you going to replace that? He did not answer. Jessica finally spoke. This was Michael's plan. He turned toward her. You agreed to everything. I didn't know he would forge Anna's signature. Patricia opened a folder and removed printed copies of messages recovered through the legal discovery process. She read one aloud. Linda will stamp it if we send the full amount by Friday. Make sure Michael uses the signature from the refinancing papers. Jessica's face lost its color. Patricia placed the message in front of her. It was sent from your phone. Jessica looked at her attorney. I was under pressure. Michael laughed bitterly. Now you are under pressure. You told me we would lose the house. We were losing everything because you kept spending money we didn't have. You bought the truck. You rented the office. You took those loans. Their accusations moved back and forth like knives. I watched them and realized neither was sorry that I had been harmed. They were sorry the plan had failed. They were sorry the evidence had survived. They were sorry consequences had finally entered the room. Richard raised his hands. This is not productive. Perhaps we can discuss a financial resolution. Patricia turned to me. Anna, I had already decided. The house is returned to me. Every recoverable dollar is restored. Michael and Jessica admit the documents were fraudulent. They stopped challenging my competence, and they never make another decision on my behalf. Michael stared at me. You know I can't do that. Then there is nothing to discuss. You would rather see your own son prosecuted? I would rather see the truth acknowledged. You are treating me like a criminal. You forged my signature, sold my home, and took the money. I am your son. That is what made it worse. The door opened behind me. Emily entered with Susan. Michael stood so abruptly that his chair struck the wall. What is she doing here? Emily looked frightened, but she did not retreat. I asked her to come, Patricia said. Emily has relevant information, and she requested to speak in the presence of counsel. She's a child, Michael snapped. I'm 19. You have no idea what this is doing to the family? Emily's hands trembled. Susan remained beside her. I know what you asked me to do, she said. Michael went still. Emily looked at me before continuing. Before Grandma's surgery, Dad told me to start writing down every time she forgot something. He said we might need examples for the doctors. A cold sensation moved through my body. Michael shook his head. That's not what I said. You told me to say Grandma left the stove on. She did once. No, she didn't. Mom left it on during Thanksgiving. Jessica stared at the table. Emily's voice strengthened. Dad told me to say Grandma got lost driving home from the pharmacy. That never happened either. He said if I helped, we could keep Grandma safe and save the company. Michael pointed toward Susan. She has turned you against us. No, Emily said. You did. The silence that followed was so complete that I heard the faint hum of the lights overhead. Michael looked at me. His expression twisted with anger and desperation. This is what you wanted, isn't it? You wanted Emily to choose you. I wanted her protected from your lies. You always cared more about that house than you cared about me. The accusation struck an old wound because part of me still remembered the little boy at Robert's workbench. For years, I had measured my love by how much I was willing to forgive. Not anymore. I loved you enough to excuse things I should have confronted, I said. Your father did the same. We kept rescuing you because we confused protection with love. I was trying to keep my family together. No, you were trying to keep control. Michael's voice rose. That house would have come to me eventually. There it was, not care, not sacrifice, not desperation, entitlement. You mean after I died? I said. He opened his mouth, but said nothing. You did not inherit my home when your father died. You did not inherit it when I became ill. And you did not gain ownership simply because you decided I had lived there long enough. Michael turned away from me. I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. I can love you and still refuse to let you destroy me. I can grieve the son I thought I raised and still hold the man sitting in front of me responsible. Jessica began crying, but the tears came too late to move me. Richard requested a private recess. Patricia refused unless all evidence remained in the room. As Michael stood, his attention shifted toward Patricia's locked evidence cabinet near the far wall. Then his gaze dropped to the document bag beside her chair, the bag that had once contained the recorder and memory card. He looked at it for only a second, but I saw the calculation return to his face. The meeting ended without an agreement. Outside, Susan helped me into her car, while Emily climbed into the back seat. Michael remained on the courthouse sidewalk, watching us leave. He had finally understood that guilt would no longer silence me. And I had finally understood something else. A desperate man who believed evidence was the only thing standing between him and prison might not limit himself to words. Patricia did not dismiss what I had noticed at the end of the meeting. The evidence is secure, she assured me. The original memory card and documents are in a bank deposit box. I also created encrypted copies and provided one to the forensic examiner. What about the recording device? It's being examined. There is nothing important left inside the safe. Michael did not know that. The next afternoon, Patricia requested additional protection for the property. Because the house was still legally registered to Charles while the fraud case remained unresolved, neither Michael nor I had permission to enter without authorization. Charles installed a temporary alarm system to protect himself from further liability. Susan's doorbell camera also captured most of my front yard and driveway. For 2 nights, nothing happened. On the 3rd night, rain began shortly after 10. Emily was sleeping in Susan's guest room with me because she no longer felt safe at her parents' house. Susan had made up a bed for herself on the living room sofa, insisting that I needed the guest mattress more than she did. I woke at 1:17 to the sound of Emily's phone vibrating. She answered, listened, and sat upright. Dad. I turned on the lamp. Emily's face went pale. No, I'm not telling you that. She ended the call and immediately locked the screen. What did he want? He asked where Patricia took the evidence. Did he say why? He said he needed to know whether she had the original recording or only a copy. The pain in my chest had improved over the previous week, but fear found every place surgery had left tender. What did you tell him? Nothing. Her phone rang again. This time, she rejected the call. A minute later, headlights moved slowly across Susan's curtains. We both froze. Susan came into the room tying the belt of her robe. Someone just parked near Anna's house, she whispered. We turned off the lamp and went to the front window. A dark truck stood halfway down the block with its headlights off. The shape looked like Michael's, but the rain blurred the license plate. Susan opened the doorbell camera application on her phone. The live view showed my driveway, the front steps, and part of the side yard. For several minutes, nothing moved. Then, a hooded figure crossed behind the shrubs. Emily covered her mouth. That's Dad. How can you be sure? Susan asked. The jacket. I bought it for him last Christmas. Michael did not approach the front door. He went toward the side entrance leading into the kitchen, an entrance Charles's workers had been using. A faint electronic beep carried through the rain. He knows the keypad code, I said. Charles had given temporary codes to several contractors. Michael might have obtained one during the sale preparations or watched someone enter it. Susan called 911 while I contacted Patricia. Stay inside, Patricia said the moment I explained. Do not confront him. The alarm company should also notify the police. Across the street, a dim light appeared inside my kitchen. Michael moved from room to room using a flashlight instead of turning on the ceiling lights. The sight of him walking through my home in darkness felt like watching a stranger where my son's body? "He's going downstairs," Emily whispered. The kitchen light disappeared. Michael knew the safe was empty of documents, but he did not know the recording system had been removed. Perhaps he believed the original footage still existed inside the wall. Perhaps he wanted to destroy the safe itself and later claim the video had been fabricated. Whatever his plan, it was not the act of an innocent man. The first police cruiser arrived without lights or sirens. A second stopped at the opposite end of the block. Susan gave the dispatcher the keypad information Patricia had obtained from Charles's attorney. 2 officers entered through the kitchen. The rain seemed to swallow every sound. We could not see what was happening below ground. Then a crash echoed from the basement. Emily grabbed my hand. A few seconds later, another officer moved toward the rear of the property. The basement storm door opened suddenly, and Michael emerged carrying a canvas tool bag. "Stop, police!" He dropped the bag and raised his hands. Even from across the street, I heard him shouting, "This is my mother's house. I have permission." The officers ordered him to the ground. Michael looked toward Susan's window, and for one terrible second, our eyes met through the rain. I saw anger first, then fear. The officers placed him in handcuffs and searched the tool bag. Later, I learned it contained a pry bar bolt cutters, a power drill, heavy gloves, and several empty plastic bags. In the basement, the wooden panel had been torn from the wall. Deep scratches marked the safe door. Michael had cut the cable from the hidden camera and ripped open the compartment that once held the recorder. He had also removed a section of drywall, apparently searching for additional storage devices. There was no innocent explanation. The police asked me, Susan, and Emily to come outside. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a coat over her pajamas. Michael stood beside a patrol car while an officer questioned him. When he saw me, he called out, "Mom, tell them I was trying to protect your property from what Whitmore's people. They could destroy Dad's things. You brought bolt cutters. I thought the safe might have been damaged." Patricia stepped between us. "Do not speak to Mrs. Schmidt." Michael ignored her. "Mom, please. You know I would never break into your house. It is the same house you said was no longer mine." His expression collapsed for a moment. The officer opened the back door of the patrol car. Michael pulled against the handcuffs. "You're really going to let them arrest me?" The question sounded almost childish. It carried the same expectation he had held for years, that no matter what he did, one of his parents would step forward and absorb the consequences. I thought of Robert discovering the missing $48,000. I imagined him sitting alone at the basement workbench, deciding not to report his son. Robert had believed mercy might inspire change. Instead, Michael learned that family love could be used as protection from accountability. "I'm not doing this to you," I said. "You came here. You violated the court order. You tried to destroy evidence. I was desperate. You have used that word to excuse everything." His face twisted with grief or rage. I could no longer tell the difference. "I'm your son." "Yes," I said, my voice breaking. "And that is why this hurts so much." The officer guided him into the car. Emily began sobbing. Susan put an arm around her shoulders while I stood in the rain watching the cruiser pull away. There was no satisfaction in it, no triumph. Only the unbearable knowledge that I had once carried that man inside my body, stayed awake beside him through childhood fevers, and believed love would be enough to guide him home. The charges expanded quickly. Michael was accused of criminal trespass, attempted destruction of evidence, violation of a court order, and property damage. Investigators added the incident to the ongoing cases involving forgery, financial exploitation, and fraud. Susan's camera showed his arrival. Charles's alarm system recorded his unauthorized entry. The police body cameras captured him leaving the basement with the tools. In trying to erase one piece of evidence, Michael had created many more. The following morning, Patricia took me to view the damage. The false wall Robert built had been torn apart. Wood lay scattered across the basement floor, and metal shavings covered the ground in front of the safe. I rested my hand against the scratched steel door. Michael had failed to open it. But as I stood there, I understood that the safe had already done its job. It had protected the truth until I was ready to protect myself. The main civil hearing began 6 weeks after Michael's arrest. By then, my surgical incision had healed into a narrow pink line, but the deeper wound remained invisible. I could walk without assistance again. I could sleep on my side. I could climb Susan's stairs without stopping halfway. What I could not do was look at my son without remembering him crawling out of my basement with tools meant to destroy the truth. Michael had been released while awaiting trial under strict conditions that prohibited him from contacting me, Emily, or Susan. He entered the courtroom through a side door with Richard beside him. Jessica sat behind her own attorney. Charles and Linda occupied separate tables. The 4 people who had once depended on the same lie now looked at one another with open suspicion. Patricia had prepared me carefully. "Answer only what is asked," she said. "If you don't know something, say so. You do not need to defend your age, your grief, or your emotions." Michael's legal team still intended to make those things the center of the case. Richard began by describing me as a recently widowed woman with a serious heart condition who had been overwhelmed by complicated financial decisions. He suggested I might have signed more than one document and later forgotten. His tone was respectful, almost compassionate. That made the attack more insulting. When I took the witness stand, he asked about Robert's death. "You experienced significant grief, correct?" "Yes. You sometimes had trouble sleeping, yes. You occasionally misplaced objects, like most people. And you were taking medication before surgery, for my heart condition. Medication that can cause fatigue or confusion." "Fatigue, possibly. My doctors found no confusion." He handed me the forged power of attorney. "Is that your signature?" "It is an imitation of my signature, but it resembles your signature. That is what makes a forgery useful." A few people in the courtroom shifted. Richard paused before continuing. He asked whether Michael had ever helped with groceries transportation or medical appointments. "Yes, so he was involved in your care. He created the appearance of care while preparing to take my property." Patricia objected before Richard could react. The judge instructed me to answer more narrowly. Richard then suggested that I had given Michael broad verbal permission to manage my affairs. "No," I said. "Never, never. Even if your health worsened, I authorized him to make limited medical decisions if I could not communicate. I did not authorize him to sell my house." Martin Hale testified next. He brought his file containing the certified copy of my legitimate power of attorney, his notes from our meeting, and the affidavits of the 2 witnesses. He explained that I had specifically rejected broad financial authority because Michael had pressured me to sign it. The court admitted Dr. Green's evaluation and the independent psychologist's report. Both concluded that I had been competent before and after surgery. My cardiologist testified that I had understood the risks of the procedure and personally approved every medical decision. The argument that I was confused began collapsing. Then the handwriting expert took the stand. Enlarged copies of my genuine and forged signatures appeared on a screen. The differences were subtle, but consistent unnatural pauses, excessive pressure, and incorrectly connected letters. "This signature was produced through simulation," the expert said. "Someone copied the visual form instead of writing naturally." Richard asked whether the expert could identify the person who created it. "No," she replied, "but the basement recording can address that question." A silence fell across the courtroom. Patricia called Linda Parker. Linda looked smaller than I remembered from photographs. Her hands shook as she took the oath. At first, she claimed she believed I had signed the document before it reached her. Patricia asked the most basic question. Did Anna Schmidt appear before you? No. Did you watch her sign? No. Did you speak with her by video? No. Did you verify her identification? Linda swallowed. Jessica sent me a copy of her driver's license. So, you notarized a power of attorney transferring control over an older woman's home without ever communicating with that woman? Yes. Patricia displayed the messages between Linda and Jessica. One included Linda's fee. Another contained Jessica's promise to pay double if the notarization was completed before noon on the day of my surgery. Linda's attorney advised her not to answer several questions, but the damage was already done. Charles testified that he relied on the notarized document and trusted the closing process. I believed Michael Schmidt had authority, he said. Patricia displayed an email Michael had sent 2 weeks before the transaction. My mother will be unavailable due to heart surgery. We need to close while she is in the hospital. Then she displayed Charles's reply. As long as the POA clears title, I don't care where she is. Charles shifted in his chair. That was unfortunate wording. Patricia showed another email in which Charles urged his closing agent not to contact me directly because the son has everything under control. The final message concerned the low purchase price. At this number, even a title problem might be worth the risk. Charles's attorney objected, but the judge allowed the email. For the first time, Charles looked genuinely frightened. Then Patricia introduced the basement recording. A forensic technician testified that the memory card had not been altered. The timestamps matched hospital records, phone locations, and printer activity. Copies were created using procedures that preserved the original evidence. The video began. Watching it in Patricia's office had been painful. Watching it in court was worse. Michael appeared on the screen at Robert's workbench, practicing my signature. Jessica scanned documents and coached him. Their voices filled the courtroom. If we can't find the original, it doesn't matter. Linda's already agreed to stamp the new one. Jessica asked what would happen if I fought back. Michael laughed. Then we tell everyone she's confused. I looked at him. He stared down at the table. The video showed him signing my name, printing the false document, and discussing the transfer of funds. It captured Jessica reminding him to pay Linda. It captured Michael saying the money needed to disappear before I woke. No legal interpretation could soften those words. Emily testified last. Her voice trembled when she described her father asking her to invent examples of my supposed memory problems. Richard suggested she was angry because Michael had threatened to stop paying her tuition. Emily looked directly at him. I was afraid of losing school, but my grandmother was afraid of losing her entire life. Those things are not equal. I felt tears rise in my eyes. The judge took a short recess before returning with a preliminary ruling. He found substantial evidence that the deed had been obtained through fraud, and that Michael lacked authority to sell the property. He continued the injunction prohibited further transfers, and ordered all parties to preserve their records. Then he addressed the lawyers. The evidence presented here goes far beyond a private disagreement concerning real estate. It suggests forgery, financial exploitation of an older adult conspiracy, false notarization, and potentially knowing participation by additional parties. He directed that the entire record be forwarded to the district attorney. Jessica began crying. Linda covered her face. Charles whispered urgently to his attorney. Michael did not move. As court adjourned, he finally looked at me. There was no anger in his expression now. Only the recognition that the story he had built around my age had collapsed beneath the weight of his own voice. Patricia touched my shoulder. We are not finished, she said. But the court believes you. For weeks, I had been forced to prove that I remembered my own life. Now the people who tried to erase me would have to explain why the evidence remembered everything. The final ruling on the house came 3 months later. Patricia called shortly after 9 on a Monday morning. "Anna," she said, "the sale has been voided." I sat silently at Susan's kitchen table, afraid that if I moved, the words might disappear. The judge found that Michael lacked authority to transfer the property. Patricia continued. "The deed was obtained through fraud. Legal title is being restored to you. The house is mine again." "Yes." Susan had been standing near the stove. When she saw my face, she turned off the burner and hurried toward me. I placed the phone on speaker so she could hear. Charles was ordered to release possession of the property and remove every claim filed by Whitmore Development. He could not demolish the house, combine the lot with neighboring parcels, or recover his losses from me. He had purchased stolen authority. He could not keep what that authority had taken. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I began to cry. For months, I had imagined returning home as the ending to the nightmare. But as Susan wrapped her arms around me, I understood that getting back the deed could not restore everything Michael had broken. The house would be mine. The trust would not. The financial consequences became more complicated. Whitmore Development filed a claim with its title insurance company, arguing that the closing agent and fraudulent power of attorney had exposed Charles to losses. The insurer opened its own investigation and began pursuing Michael, Jessica, Linda, and several people involved in the transfer. Charles continued claiming he had been deceived. The emails told a less innocent story. His message about accepting the risk of a title problem, his refusal to contact me, and the deeply discounted purchase price all suggested he had chosen profit over caution. The district attorney did not immediately charge him, but the investigation into his company remained open. Several neighborhood projects were suspended. Investors withdrew from 2 planned developments. Charles, who once spoke to me as if I were an inconvenience standing on his porch, now communicated only through attorneys. Michael's company collapsed. The court froze its remaining accounts and authorized a financial examiner to trace the sale proceeds. Equipment was seized. His office lease was terminated. A bank began foreclosure proceedings against the large house where he and Jessica had lived. Some money was recoverable. The $60,000 Jessica moved into the account under her maiden name had not been spent. That amount was frozen and later returned through a court-supervised settlement. Several payments Michael made to people who knew about his financial problems were also recovered. Other funds were gone. Some contractors had received payment for legitimate work and had no knowledge that the money came from a fraudulent sale. Patricia explained that pursuing every innocent recipient would create additional costs and harm people who had already earned what they were paid. "I don't want their families punished for Michael's crime," I said. The title insurer and other defendants would eventually cover much of the remaining financial loss. I might never recover every dollar Michael had moved, but I would not lose my house because of it. Linda surrendered her notary commission before the state could revoke it. She agreed to cooperate with prosecutors and admitted that she had certified my signature without seeing me speaking to me or verifying my identity directly. Her confession exposed the deliberate speed of the scheme and prevented Jessica from pretending she knew nothing about the forged document. Jessica began cooperating soon after. Her attorney provided investigators with messages, emails, and financial records stored on her phone. She admitted contacting Linda and helping Michael copy my signature. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to consider her cooperation when making sentencing recommendations. Emily struggled with that decision. "My mother helped steal your house," she said one evening. "Now she gets a better deal because she blamed Dad. She is still responsible," I said. "Cooperation does not make her innocent." "Do you hate her?" I considered the question. "No, but I do not trust her." "Is that worse?" "Sometimes it lasts longer." Jessica filed for divorce from Michael within weeks of the company's collapse. She moved into a rented apartment and asked Emily to live with her. Emily declined. She told Jessica she needed time and would remain with Susan and me until she felt safe making a different choice. I was proud of her, but I reminded her that she did not need to make permanent decisions while still hurting. Your mother's failures belong to her, I said. Your healing belongs to you. Michael initially rejected every plea agreement. Richard continued arguing that the sale had been a desperate financial act rather than intentional exploitation. Then the charges from the basement break-in were added to the fraud case, and the evidence became nearly impossible to challenge. Michael had been recorded forging my signature. His phone records linked him to Linda. The bank transfers proved he used the money immediately. The hospital notes documented his questions about declaring me incompetent. The security footage showed him returning to destroy what he believed was the original evidence. Eventually, he accepted a plea agreement covering forgery theft, by deception, financial exploitation of an older adult conspiracy, and criminal trespass. Additional charges were consolidated into the agreement. Before the sentencing hearing, Patricia received a letter addressed to me. The envelope carried Michael's handwriting. I left it unopened for 2 days. Susan did not pressure me. Emily did not ask what it contained. On the third evening, I sat alone at Susan's table and opened it. Mom, I am sorry things went this far. I never wanted to hurt you. I was under pressure that nobody understood. The company was failing, creditors were coming after me, and I was trying to protect Jessica and Emily. I believed the house would eventually be mine, and I planned to repay the money when business improved. You have to understand that I felt like I had no choice. I stopped reading. There had been many choices. Michael could have told me the truth about his debts. He could have sold his truck, downsized his house, declared bankruptcy, closed the company, or accepted that failure would be painful. Instead, he decided my home was easier to sacrifice than his pride. He chose to forge my name. He chose to sell the house while I was unconscious. He chose to call me confused. He chose to pressure Emily into lying. He chose to return to the basement with tools. Desperation explained why he was afraid. It did not erase what he decided to do with that fear. The letter ended with a request for forgiveness and a promise that he would change if I asked the judge for leniency. Even his apology came with a demand. I folded the pages and placed them back inside the envelope. "Are you going to answer?" Susan asked when she entered the kitchen. No. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At the sentencing hearing, I gave a short victim impact statement. I did not ask for the harshest punishment, and I did not ask for mercy. I asked the court to hold Michael responsible. He received a prison sentence, restitution obligations, and required counseling. Jessica received probation, financial penalties, and community service under the terms of her cooperation agreement. When the judge asked Michael whether he understood the sentence, he said yes without looking at me. I watched the deputies lead him away. I felt grief, but no regret. A boundary can feel cruel when someone has spent years benefiting from your lack of one. The following week, Patricia handed me a new certified deed. My name appeared exactly where it belonged. Anna Schmidt. This time, the signature beneath it was truly mine. I returned home on a clear Saturday morning in early spring. Susan had offered to drive me, but I wanted to walk the short distance between our houses. Emily carried one suitcase while Susan followed with a box containing my medication, the restored wedding portrait, and the certified deed Patricia had given me. The sold sign was gone. In its place, the front yard held only the small wooden post Robert had installed years earlier for hanging flower baskets. The orange survey flags had been removed, though several pale scars remained in the grass. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. For 36 years, I had entered that house without thinking. I had come home from night shifts, grocery stores, funerals, birthdays, and ordinary afternoons. I had never imagined that walking through my own front door could require courage. Susan handed me the new key. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm going in anyway." The lock turned smoothly. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The second was how unfamiliar everything looked. Furniture had been pushed into corners. Dust covered the floors. Several cabinet doors hung crooked because Charles's workers had removed them while evaluating the kitchen. Labels remained attached to boxes throughout the living room. Donate, storage, disposal. Someone else had sorted my life according to what they considered valuable. Emily placed her suitcase down and began removing labels. "You don't have to do that now," I told her. "I know." She tore the word disposal from a box of Robert's books and crushed it in her hand. The mantel clock was gone, but Susan had found it in a storage facility listed in the court inventory. One side was scratched and the pendulum no longer moved. I placed it back above the fireplace anyway. Robert had taught me that broken things could still belong somewhere before they were repaired. The wedding portrait went beside it. The glass had been replaced, but a faint line remained across the frame. I considered buying a new one. Then I decided to keep the damaged frame. Some marks deserved to remain, not because I wanted to relive the pain, but because survival should not have to pretend nothing happened. We spent the next 2 weeks restoring the house. Neighbors brought food, cleaning supplies, and offers of help. A retired electrician repaired the basement wiring Michael had destroyed. Susan's nephew rebuilt the false wall, though I asked him to leave the safe visible behind a locked cabinet. "I don't want truth hidden quite so deeply anymore," I said. A locksmith replaced every exterior lock. I installed cameras at the doors, motion sensors near the basement windows, and an alarm system connected directly to my phone. For the first few nights, every electronic sound startled me. Then the system became reassuring. Security did not mean I was living in fear. It meant I had learned that trust and protection were not opposites. Emily moved into the bedroom that had once been Michael's. She was hesitant at first. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Does it feel strange?" "It feels like a room," I said. "And you need one." She brought only a few boxes from her parents' house. Most of her belongings had been lost when the bank took possession of the property. Jessica offered to send the rest, but Emily was not ready to see her. I made one rule clear. You are not here to take your father's place. Emily looked wounded. "I wasn't trying to. I know. But I don't want you to believe you have to repair what he broke. You are my granddaughter. That is enough." She lowered her eyes. "Sometimes I feel guilty when I'm happy here." "Why?" "Because Dad is in prison. Mom is alone, and we're rebuilding everything. Their consequences are not your betrayal, but they're still my parents. Yes, you can love them and still protect yourself." The words sounded familiar because I was still learning to live by them too. Emily began seeing a counselor through her college. She returned to classes, found a part-time job at the campus library, and gradually stopped checking every unknown car that passed the house. She did not cut Jessica out of her life entirely. They spoke by phone once a week. Some calls ended in tears, but others ended peacefully. I never asked Emily what they discussed. Healing could not grow if I forced her to choose one side of the family forever. My own healing was less visible. I attended cardiac rehabilitation 3 mornings a week. I walked on a treadmill beside people recovering from bypass surgeries and heart attacks. We compared scars, complained about bland dietary advice, and celebrated small improvements. My body grew stronger. My grief changed more slowly. Some mornings, anger arrived before I opened my eyes. Other days, I remembered Michael at 5 years old, asleep against Robert's shoulder. and felt a tenderness so painful it left me breathless. I had to accept that both versions of him were real. The child I loved had existed. So had the man who sold my home. One memory did not erase the other. When the basement repairs were complete, I returned Robert's binders and personal documents to the safe. The legal evidence remained with Patricia until every proceeding ended, but Robert's letter belonged with me. One evening, I carried it upstairs and sat in his chair beside the living room window. The first time I read it, I had been surrounded by lawyers, strangers, and the shock of Michael's recorded voice. I had absorbed only the warning. This time, I read every word. Robert wrote about Michael's childhood, his curiosity, his kindness, and his hunger to prove himself. He admitted that he had often praised success without teaching Michael how to endure failure. When Michael stole the $48,000, Robert confronted him privately. Michael cried, promised repayment, and begged him not to tell me. Robert agreed. In the letter, he confessed that decision had haunted him. I told myself I was protecting your heart, Anna. The truth is that I was protecting myself from admitting what our son had become. Tears blurred the page. Robert had not left the camera and records because he wanted revenge. He left them because he understood his earlier silence might place me in danger. The letter continued. If Michael ever betrays you, do not measure your love by how much pain you are willing to accept. Love is not proven by becoming smaller, so another person can escape the consequences of what they have done. At the bottom, Robert had written one final paragraph. This house is wood brick and years of work. It matters because our life happened here. But if you ever have to choose between protecting the house and protecting yourself, choose yourself. You were always the home I loved most. I pressed the letter against my chest. For months, I had fought as though saving the property was the only way to preserve Robert. Now I understood that he had never wanted the house to become another prison. I could keep it because I chose to stay, not because grief demanded it. That evening, Emily and I cooked dinner together. Susan came over with a pie, and we ate around the kitchen table Robert had built. We laughed when the crust fell apart, and Susan blamed my oven. The sound filled the rooms that had been silent for too long. Later, I stood alone on the porch beneath a sky turning violet over Pittsburgh. The house was mine again, but I was not the same woman who had left it for surgery. I had lost the illusion that family loyalty could cure dishonesty. I had lost the future I once imagined with my son. I had lost the comfort of believing love always brought people back. Yet I had gained something I should never have surrendered. The right to decide what happened next. 1 year after I woke in the hospital and learned my son had sold my house, I stood in the basement arranging folding chairs for 12 women I had never met. The room no longer looked like the place where Michael forged my signature. Robert's workbench remained against the wall, repaired and polished. His tools hung above it in their familiar rows. We had painted the other walls a soft gray and added bookshelves, a coffee station, and a long table for documents. A small sign near the stairs read, "Protect your voice, protect your future." The idea began during a conversation with Patricia. I had asked how often older adults were financially exploited by members of their own families. More often than most people realize, she said, and many never report it because they are ashamed. That word troubled me. Shame belonged to the person who committed the betrayal, yet victims often carried it instead. I knew what it felt like to wonder whether loving Michael too much had made me foolish. I knew the humiliation of proving that my own memories were real. I also knew how frightening legal language could become when someone used it as a weapon. So I asked Patricia whether we could organize a small workshop. The first meeting drew 7 women. The second drew 16. By the end of the year, we were meeting twice a month. Patricia explained powers of attorney, beneficiary designations, property records, and warning signs of financial abuse. I spoke about keeping copies of important documents and telling more than one trusted person where originals were stored. Susan handled registration with the authority of a retired school principal, though she had never worked in education. She brought cookies, corrected everyone's phone numbers, and scolded anyone who tried to leave without taking an information packet. Emily designed the flyers and helped women learn how to use banking alerts, password managers, and security applications. She was 20 now and finishing her second year of college. The frightened girl who once called me from a borrowed phone had become more confident. She still attended counseling, and she maintained careful boundaries with Jessica. Some weeks they spoke. Other weeks, Emily chose silence. I never interfered. Jessica had found steady office work and moved into a modest apartment. She continued completing the community service required by the court. She sent me one written apology. Unlike Michael's first letter, Jessica did not ask me to forgive her. She admitted she had viewed my house as a solution to her own problems and convinced herself I would be comfortable somewhere else. She acknowledged helping forge the document and trying to undermine my credibility. I accepted the letter as evidence that she understood the truth. I did not invite her back into my life. Understanding someone's regret does not automatically restore access to you. Michael had been incarcerated for 11 months when the second letter arrived. His name on the envelope still affected me. My first instinct was to place it in a drawer unopened. But the handwriting looked different, slower and less controlled, as though each word had required thought. I carried it downstairs and sat at Robert's workbench. Dear Mom, there is no excuse for what I did. I stopped reading after that first sentence and allowed myself to breathe. Michael wrote that he had spent months in a counseling program for financial offenders. At first, he treated the sessions as another requirement to complete. He blamed the failed company Jessica's spending dishonest clients and the pressure of supporting a family. His counselor kept asking one question: who made the decision? The answer was always, Michael. He admitted that he had treated my house as an inheritance he deserved before my life was over. He admitted using my surgery because I could not stop him. He acknowledged trying to portray me as mentally incompetent, knowing I was fully capable. He apologized for manipulating Emily and threatening her education. He apologized for returning to the basement. He apologized for making his desperation everyone else's responsibility. Then he wrote something I had not expected. I understand if you never forgive me. I am not writing to ask you to reduce my sentence, send money, or promise that we will be a family again. I only want you to know that what happened was my fault. You did not fail me by telling the truth. I failed you when I decided your love would protect me from it. I read that paragraph 3 times. It did not repair the damage. It did not restore the years of trust. But for the first time, Michael's apology did not contain a hidden demand. I waited 2 weeks before answering. My letter was brief. Michael, I received your letter. Taking responsibility is the beginning of change, not proof that change is complete. I love you, but love will not erase what happened. If you continue doing the work, perhaps one day we can speak under safe and honest conditions. I make no promises beyond that. Mom, I asked Patricia to review it before I sent it. Not because the letter contained legal risks, but because I was still learning to trust boundaries that felt both compassionate and firm. You're not closing the door, Patricia said. No, you're also not unlocking it. Not yet. That distinction gave me peace. On the morning of our newest workshop, 12 women filled the basement. One had discovered that her nephew was using her credit card. Another worried her daughter was pressuring her to add a name to the deed. A recently widowed woman admitted she had signed documents she did not understand because she felt too embarrassed to ask questions. I stood before them and told my story. I did not describe myself as a victim who had become fearless. Fear had never disappeared completely. I still checked the locks at night. I still felt uneasy when unfamiliar cars slowed near the house. But courage was not the absence of fear. It was refusing to let fear make the decision. After the meeting ended, Susan gathered coffee cups while Emily stacked chairs. "You realize Grandpa would complain we moved his tools," Emily said. "He would move them all back exactly 1 inch and pretend he didn't." We laughed. When they went upstairs, I remained beside the safe. Inside were 2 letters. Robert's letter reminded me of a love that had tried even imperfectly to protect me. Michael's second letter represented something more complicated. Harm honestly named, responsibility finally accepted, and a possibility that might or might not become reconciliation. I placed neither letter above the other. They did not carry equal meaning. Robert's words had helped save me. Michael's words could only show whether he was beginning to save himself. I closed the safe and turned the dial. The next morning, sunlight moved across the front porch as I stepped outside with a cup of coffee. The grass had recovered where Charles's surveyors once planted their flags. Flowers hung from Robert's wooden post bright against the blue siding. My surgical scar remained visible beneath my blouse. The scratches Michael left on the safe remained too. I had stopped wishing either one would disappear. Scars were not proof that suffering had won. They were proof that something wounded had remained alive long enough to heal. I looked back at the house Robert and I had built then toward the street, stretching beyond it. A year earlier, Michael believed my age, illness, and love for him would make me easy to erase. He was wrong. I had recovered more than a deed. I had recovered my name from a forged signature, my voice from those who called me confused, and my future from people who had already divided it without me. The house belonged to me again, but more importantly, so did my life. When I look back on everything that happened, the deepest lesson was never really about a house. The house mattered. It held 36 years of memories, Robert's craftsmanship, Michael's childhood, Emily's laughter, and the ordinary moments that had quietly shaped my life. Losing it felt as though someone had reached into my past and declared that none of it belonged to me anymore. But what Michael truly tried to take was not made of wood, brick, or glass. He tried to take my right to decide. He assumed that because I was an older woman recovering from surgery, other people would trust his judgment more than mine. He believed age made my voice less credible, illness made my wishes less important, and motherhood guaranteed my silence. For too long, I had confused love with endless forgiveness. Robert and I rescued Michael whenever consequences threatened him. We told ourselves we were protecting our son, but protection without accountability does not always help a person grow. Sometimes it teaches them that someone else will absorb the damage. That does not mean parents should blame themselves for every terrible choice an adult child makes. Michael was responsible for his actions. He had many honest options, yet he chose deception because he believed it would be easier. Still, I had to recognize my own pattern. I had spent years treating boundaries as a form of rejection. I believed saying no meant I was failing as a mother. I was wrong. A boundary is not punishment. It is a statement of truth. It says, "I love you, but I will not help you harm me." It says, "Your pain may explain your behavior, but it does not excuse your cruelty." It says, "Being related to me does not give you ownership of my money, property, body time, or future." Many women of my generation were taught to keep families together at any cost. We learned to smooth over arguments, hide embarrassing truths, and sacrifice quietly. We were told that a good mother forgives a good wife, endures, and a good grandmother never becomes a burden. But who benefits when one person must become smaller to preserve everyone else's comfort. Silence does not always keep a family together. Sometimes it protects the person tearing that family apart. Speaking the truth about someone you love can be heartbreaking. It can feel disloyal. But loyalty should never require dishonesty, and love should never demand your destruction. I also learned that age does not make a person invisible unless society chooses not to see them. I was 68 when Michael decided my independent life was almost over. He arranged my living situation, sold my property, and spent my money as though my future had already been canceled. But I was still here. I was still capable of learning, choosing, resisting rebuilding, and beginning again. There is no age at which a woman stops deserving control over her own life. If someone pressures you to sign a document you do not understand, stop. Ask questions. Consult an independent attorney, someone chosen by you, not the person seeking authority. Keep copies of your deed will power of attorney identification, financial statements, and medical directives in a secure place. Make sure more than one trusted person knows where important documents can be found. Pay attention when help begins to feel like control. Concern sounds like, "What do you want?" Control sounds like, "I already decided what is best for you." Concern offers assistance while respecting your answer. Control creates fear, urgency, guilt, or confusion until resistance feels impossible. And if the person pressuring you is your son, daughter, spouse, grandchild, or another relative, remember that family relationships do not make exploitation less serious. They make the betrayal more painful, but they do not make it acceptable. Ask for help. Speak to a trusted friend, physician, attorney, bank employee, adult protective services worker, or law enforcement officer. Document conversations. Save messages. Do not let embarrassment isolate you. The shame is not yours. Perhaps the hardest lesson involved forgiveness. People often speak about forgiveness as though it must include reconciliation. They say, "He is still your son," as if biology erases accountability. They ask whether holding someone responsible means you have become bitter. I do not believe that anymore. Forgiveness, if it comes, can release anger from your heart. It does not automatically restore trust. Reconciliation requires safety, honesty, time, and consistent change. Michael's second letter mattered because he finally accepted responsibility without demanding a reward. But one honest letter could not erase years of choices. I could acknowledge the beginning of his change without giving him immediate access to my life. Trust is not rebuilt by promises. It is rebuilt through repeated actions. Sometimes the most loving answer is not never. Sometimes it is not yet. And sometimes, when safety requires it, the answer must remain no. Justice did not give me back the family I once imagined. It did not remove the memory of waking in the hospital and learning my home had been sold. It did not make Robert return or transform Michael into the child I remembered. But justice returned my voice. Healing began when I stopped asking why my love had not been enough to prevent Michael's betrayal, and started asking what I needed to protect the life that remained. I needed truth. I needed boundaries. I needed people like Susan, Patricia, and Emily who stood beside me without trying to speak over me. Most of all, I needed to believe that my future was still worth defending. That is what I hope you take from my story. You are not selfish for protecting what you spent a lifetime building. You are not cruel for refusing to finance another person's dishonesty. You are not disloyal for telling the truth about someone who harmed you. And you are never too old to stand up, begin again, or reclaim your name. A house can be stolen and returned. Money can be lost and sometimes recovered. Trust once broken may take years to rebuild. But dignity begins returning the moment you decide that your life still belongs to you. If you were in my position, would you have allowed Michael another chance after his second letter? Or would you have closed that door forever? Please share your thoughts in the comments. If this story reminded you of something you have survived, you are welcome to share that too. Your experience may help another person feel less alone. And if you believe stories about courage, family betrayal, justice, and healing deserve to be heard, please subscribe and join us for the next one. Your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and your life is always worth protecting.